Hi everybody and welcome. So this is going to be a follow-up video on the video I released about a week ago and maybe the first in a multi-part series that I'm going to be doing. Yeah, I might make one or two more videos about this project depending on how things go in the future. But yeah, so yeah, in my initial video, I actually wrote up a report on pretty much all the major theory and stuff behind this project that I had worked on. But yeah, overall, this project is pretty complex, and I think there's a lot of like confusion about it. A lot of the comments were very confused on the first video, at least. So yeah, I wanted to make this video just kind of like to cover a lot of the theory behind it and just a lot of the background behind what is actually going on behind the scenes. So yeah, this video is going to basically just be like an overview, and then maybe in the future videos I might go into like some more depths about some other things. But yeah, first off, I wanted to give a big thanks to a couple of people. Yeah, XCOM 6000. First off, he has, along with me and some other people as well, been working on this project for quite a long time. There's been like it's been quite a ride actually, and yeah, he's been there for pretty much most of it. Um, Also, thanks to Earth Computer, who has contributed some pretty significant breakthroughs to this project. Yeah, as well as Matthew Bolin, aka, or I guess Six Son FS Joe, aka Matthew Bolin, who has made some contributions as well. Um, Also, basically everyone else who has contributed. Um, XCOM has been doing a few streams working on this project, and yeah, a lot of other people have been contributing there as well, so I wanted to thank them as well. But yeah, I guess let's kind of jump into it. So yeah, first off, what is the motivation for this project? What is the motivation behind what I showed in that initial video? So yeah, pretty much for a long time, I guess basically since Minecraft has been out, there has kind of been like this age-old question of, you know, dealing with these quote-unquote unobtainable blocks, or these blocks in survival that we're not supposed to interact with or be able to manipulate in the world. A lot of people have like in the past been able to break bedrock or just get items they aren't supposed to be able to get. And yeah, in the current versions of survival, like as you can see in that picture there, I have some of the blocks that like we as players in survival aren't really supposed to be able to manipulate or obtain as items. But the question has kind of always been: is there a way to get them, or is there a way to like move these blocks around in the world? Is there a way we in survival can basically interact with these things in ways we aren't supposed to be able to? And yeah, so major goal with this project, the major theory behind it is trying to obtain these blocks in survival as items that we are not supposed to be able to obtain. And yeah, there's kind of one uh, major idea that's kind of been floating around for a long time regarding this, and it is a theoretical way to get these items, these blocks as items, and it involves falling block entities. So, we have sand, gravel, concrete powder, a few other things as well in survival that can convert from regular blocks into these blocks that can fall. And it turns out, like, if you look closely at the code, um, there's sort of a theoretical way that we can create falling block entities of any kind of block, not just the ones we're supposed to, like sand, gravel, etc. And an important thing to know about these is that if we can create these entities in survival of blocks that aren't like standard falling blocks, then we can theoretically get them as items in survival. So I'm going to cut over to Minecraft for a second. All right, so here we are. So one thing to note about these falling block entities is that you could actually, with commands, create these entities of any block type you want. So, like we can theoretically see if we got one of these in survival, like what we could do with it, and see, just kind of I guess look at what it would theoretically be like. So here I just have a command to spawn one of an end portal frame. So if I click this block, it falls here on this torch right here, as you can see, and as you can see, it drops as an item. And so this is basically a way that circumvents the normal code for dropping blocks of end portal frames and other items as well. Like certain blocks are hard coded basically to not drop as an item, like if they were mined or destroyed in the world or stuff like that. But this code is actually not used when when a falling block gets broken. So if a falling block entity of an ender portal frame was created and fell on a torch right here, you can see we get the block, and this works for almost all block types. Certain block types like don't even have an item, so they can't like go to the code and get that item to drop because it doesn't even exist. But actually most blocks do. So we look here, another example is bedrock. This is another way to get a bedrock item, besides Earth Computer's method that he showcased a couple months ago, or maybe like a month or two. Not totally sure, don't remember. Yeah, and this, like I said, it works for almost all block types. One of my favorite is the sapling block. I think it just kind of looks funny as a falling block. But yeah, as you can see, it drops as an item as well. Also, another notable one is monster spawners. And as you can see, it's like a normal falling block. It could sit and rest on a fence, but yeah, will also fall as an item. And one thing to note about these monster spawners, if they either fall and get placed as a block, or you get the item and you place it, it will always just be a pig spawner. Yeah, there's still like no known way to like convert spawner types because yeah, there's just like some specific like tile entity code and stuff, and like block property code for spawner type and stuff, which is really not easily, like you can't really manipulate that, or at least there isn't a known way to do that at this point in time. But yeah, all right, we're gonna go back to the presentation there. 1 second. All right, we're back. So yeah, the real question, I guess, is how are we gonna do this? Is there a possible way that we can create these falling block entities? Is there a way that we can switch out blocks before the entity is created so that we can make like any type of falling block entity? And yeah, so there has been like many attempts and like theories and ideas about how to do this in the past. Like we had thought to do things similar to like how other exploits were performed in the past, like a lot of miscellaneous or just pretty much random Minecraft exploits that happen are due to like being able to alter blocks in the world at points in time that like the game doesn't think we should be able to, or I guess Mojang didn't think we should be able to. So for example, like TNT duplication, while a piston is pushing, we're able to update a TNT that is budded, so it starts exploding. But yeah, like the game had already started pushing the TNT block, so it thinks like it has to still be there. So it still treats it like there was a TNT block there. Also, other exploits, like a lot of piston exploits, I guess. Another one is like pig spawner generation, where we move spawner blocks with pistons. In that case, we create a pig spawner in a place the piston was going to push a block. So like if it would normally check if it could push a spawner there, it wouldn't be able to, but we placed it after like a check has already been done, so we can push it in that case. So basically we wondered if there was a similar way to do that for this falling block exploit. And yeah, a lot of people have spent like quite a lot of time on this, and it was kind of concluded that it's not really possible to do that, similar to like the way these other exploits were done. But yeah, there was kind of like this one final idea that we wouldn't actually need to do that, and we can instead do it by using a different thread. So yeah, if you don't like know much about like computer science topics, this might be a bit confusing. But like you could think of a thread in Java or basically any running on any computer as like a specific set of instructions that are going to execute sequentially. Like it's each thread will have its own list of instructions, and they both can be executing at the same time. So like one will be executing its list, the other can be executing its list, and they could all be running at the exact same time. And so if we can use a different thread to change this block, then in theory, we should be able to swap that block out at like an arbitrary point in time relative to like the code that will be creating the falling block. So yeah, that is the general idea behind what we're trying to do with this project, and like what I was trying to do when I was working on this. So yeah, basically the idea or the what we want to do is something called a race condition, and that is where one thread can change things that another thread will be using, but it changes it in a way that would be like unexpected by the programmer or the user of the program, or whatever you want to say. I have a little example image right there of like counters not working correctly when two different threads are executing at once. Also another diagram there, kind of like showing the idea behind multi-threading. Like each thread will have its own memory and stack space, and yeah, I guess in Java they'll probably share the heap space, but they will each have their own code that they're executing at the same time, or can be executing at the same time. But yeah, can we really do this? Is there a way to use multi-threading to try and perform this exploit? And yeah, one of the major problems with this is that Minecraft is generally a single-threaded game or program. It's kind of just always been designed that way, and it's also kind of been a major bottleneck that has existed for quite a long time that people don't really like. Like it's actually kind of hard to have a server that's running with a lot of players on it, and one of the big reasons for that is that it is primarily a single-threaded program. Yeah, like in past versions or recent-ish versions, maybe the past couple years or so, they've tried to introduce like more multi-threading to take advantage of like some servers that would have the hardware that could help with that. Like if you have if it had a CPU with a lot of cores, that would be like these other threads could run on those cores, and that would help take a little bit of load off the main game thread that's running. But yeah, still things are primarily single-threaded, and there isn't like we need sort of an entry point that would allow us to try and use another thread for what we're trying to do. And yeah, there was one case where that was like theorized to be possible to use it, and that was found by Earth Computer. I think maybe in 2018 or 2019 or something. And it's actually some code that gets executed to update beacon beams, like when stained glass is moved or like destroyed or added in the world. The beacon beams, like you could see in that picture there, um, update to change colors, and some code gets ran on another thread for this. And yeah, the beacon beam code for our purposes is actually pretty interesting. So yeah, like if you take a closer look at this, there's basically 2 points of interest in this code. This method called update color async gets added to a thread pool that's called downloader executor. A runnable, quote unquote runnable, is submitted to it, which is basically like a Java function object, or like a Lambda, if maybe you're familiar with C++ or another language. But yeah, this will get ran on that separate thread pool, and there's 2 points of interest here. One of them I have highlighted there. It's this call to get block state. There's also another one called get chunk from block coords. Both of these pieces of code have the ability to load a chunk if that chunk isn't loaded and the block that it's trying to get is in that not loaded chunk. So if a chunk is not loaded and it does this call, it will load it into the world. And when a chunk gets loaded in the world, some interesting things can happen, including being able to with like a few different steps. There's also like a couple ways maybe you can arbitrarily change blocks in the world using that loaded chunk. So I guess the question we were exploring was, can we use this beacon beam code to load a chunk in the world? And yeah, so that was our goal for quite a while, quite a long time, to get this beacon beam code to be able to load a chunk in the world. This would eventually in theory, allow us to perform this exploit with the falling block entities. So yeah, there's like quite a bit of theory that was done with this. A lot of people had quite a bit of ideas. But the major problem that was experienced was that the chunk that we were going to do these calls to get block state with, or get chunk calls, get chunk from chunk coords, was already loaded and pretty much needed to have been loaded for things to have worked, for the code to have originally gotten called, basically. So like if a stained glass was broken or placed in the world, that chunk would have needed to have been loaded already, because like operations were being performed on it, so it must have already been loaded in the world. And yeah, so that was basically the major problem. Get block states were only going to be called on this chunk that where in the same chunk where the glass block was placed or broken. So yeah, one idea was to see if we could wait for the chunk to unload before we try to have the thread do these calls to get block state. Can we delay the execution of this thread for in waiting for this chunk to unload? And yeah, this turned out to not really work in practice. It was maybe theoretically possible, but it probably wasn't going to realistically happen without serious hacks introduced, or modifications to code or even hardware modifications. So yeah, basically my major discovery or recent discovery was finding the ability to force a chunk to load even if it was already loaded. So we are able to, in fact, load this chunk where the glass was placed or broken, even though the chunk was already loaded. And then we can do basically everything we want to do from that. So, yeah, this was I think gave a decent enough explanation in the report I wrote up on this. But yeah, it's still quite a complex, basically like a set of steps maybe to actually perform this. And if you don't have like some computer science knowledge or programming knowledge, this would probably be quite difficult to understand still. But the essence is basically performing an unexpected thing / operation on the data structure that is storing the chunks in the game, like in RAM. In RAM, the game stores the chunks in this data structure called a hash map, and there is a way to kind of perform a hack with this code in using multi-threading to perform like an unexpected result. And yeah, so this hash map implementation that is used by the game is called long to object open hash map. It uses a key that is created from the chunk coordinates, and then the value stored is like a Java reference to the chunk. And the idea was to access this data structure from the main game thread and the beacon beam thread at the same time. And in doing so, in a very specific circumstance, it turns out that on the beacon beam thread, we can get the map in a state where it actually can't find the chunk that is actually in the map, but it can't find it due to some modifications that are currently being made by the main game thread. So the map won't be able to find it. It'll say, "Oh, well, the chunk isn't here because I can't find it." And then what it'll do, it will just try and load the chunk like it normally does in a case where it can't find the chunk. So it will either try to load it from disk, or it will just try and create a new chunk. It'll try and generate a new chunk just like it normally will. So yeah, it turns out that this does work in practice. I've been able to perform it and get it like fairly consistently, considering it does require a race condition. So it actually turns out that we are using this race condition with the hash map to try to eventually be able to perform another race condition with the falling block. It's kind of funny how things turned out there, but yeah. It turns out, yeah, this does work. It can be performed sort of consistently. And in theory, this will eventually allow us to get these arbitrary falling block types. So yeah, here is a diagram. Yeah, so I think maybe a week ago, XCOM had a stream where him and quite a few other people were working on this project and kind of exploring some stuff. And a lot of people had like made some diagrams and stuff. And this is, well, it's not really a diagram, but an example. I'll also link him in the description. He has quite some cool stuff that he's done, and you guys should definitely check him out too. But yeah, he wrote up this little list here that I think is a decent set of like steps of what need to be performed for this exploit to work properly. So yeah, I guess I'm not gonna like explain everything here, but I think this is this list here is basically generally correct in showing like the ideas we need of what we need to do to get things to work. There's like a couple, maybe few code specific things that aren't exactly accurate, but it's still pretty good, I think. So I guess, yeah, next. Following, like, let's say we got this chunk exploit to work properly. A chunk was loaded from the beacon beam thread. Now the major point of concern is doing the replacement of the falling block type. So how are we going to use this to replace the falling block in the world at the correct time? So yeah, there's like kind of two, ideas, way to do this. In my teaser video was originally using the population, quote unquote method, but I guess the maybe easiest or straightforward way of doing this is just using the chunk that was reloaded. So if we use chunk save stating, which is something discovered by Earth Computer and Skyrising, I believe. I'll probably link that in the description as well. If we use chunk save stating, what we can reliably have a different chunk that is stored on disk than the chunk that is currently stored in RAM and is being used by the game. So in the actual game, we can have a falling block, we could have a sand block in a certain position, but when we perform the chunk reload, the game will try and get the chunk from disk, and this chunk on disk, since it's save stated, will have a different block in that position than this block that was in RAM, than this sand block. So when this chunk finally gets put into the map, the hash map, after being reloaded from disk, after that, if any thread, but in this case, if the main thread is trying to access a block in that position, it will get the block that was in the chunk that was on disk instead of the one that was in RAM. So theoretically, we want to have the reloaded chunk get put in the hash map after the check is done, or after the block is gotten in the world, for the check to be done to confirm that it's the right block type for the falling block, but before the actual code gets executed to create the falling block entity in the world. I've been trying to perform this legitimately for quite some time, with some a couple of hacks and modifications to the game, even just some pretty minimal ones as well. I have been able to successfully do this and get an end portal frame with my current setup as an item. But yeah, in practice, in a completely legitimate environment in the vanilla game, this is still quite difficult to perform in reality. It's basically just another race condition, and an even more difficult one that has to be performed right after the original one, with the asynchronous chunk loading to happen as well. And yeah, the one I used in my teaser video was to use chunk population. So if the chunk was save stated such that it was not populated, it can, on getting loaded, perform chunk population, which we can basically get block updates from, which allow us to arbitrarily place blocks in the world relative to the execution of the main thread. One idea would just be to have this chunk get populated and place a dungeon spawner on population, and then from the main game thread try and get a falling block entity of the spawner. And in reality, it would be quite a bit more complex than that, but still theoretically possible. But yeah, this method is probably more difficult to perform in practice. but may be useful in certain cases. One of the things with it is, the nice things about it is like being able to get block updates from it. So that combined with like instant tile ticks, like in theory could allow for like a quote unquote clock that just is like an instant clock that is constantly running. Like if we were able to avoid a stack overflow with that, we could like theoretically have that instant clock running in this off thread, not like detached from the main game thread, and just like have that clock or quote unquote clock. In reality, I don't think it could be an actual clock due to like it eventually causing a stack overflow. But I think we maybe could get like arbitrary redstone executing for quite a bit of like even real world time relative to the main game thread. And I think this could maybe be useful in trying to perform this falling block exploit. And yeah, that's kind of what I meant by persistence there. Like maybe we could use this to do many attempts of trying to perform the falling block swapping, because we could get like tons of random block updates from the off thread, and we could cause arbitrary blocks to be placed with that in certain positions, as well as maybe even using that thread to start making blocks fall, and then in the main game thread we could like switch blocks out. But yeah, this is just theory. Haven't done much testing with that, but that could be possible. But yeah, like I was talking about a little bit earlier, a big concern is the actual feasibility of doing this race condition in game. And yeah, this isn't just like in Minecraft where we need like a specific, like in, I guess, standard exploits where we need a block update to go off and perform a bunch of random operations, and we just need to get like the block update correct or whatever. This involves real world CPU time considerations and like considering how long each thread takes to execute. And so yeah, for the chunk reloading, the main thing is that the main thread needs to be able to post the task onto the beacon thread pool, as well as generate or load a chunk from disk before the task finishes. And yeah, in practice, it turns out this isn't really that easy. It's still feasible and possible, and yeah, makes it much more easy than like trying to unload the chunk before the thread would reload it again. But it's still quite difficult to perform in practice, because like generally speaking, the load time from file will take longer than it will take the beacon beam thread to finish executing its code. One way I've found to like circumvent this is to use specific chunks that are in the end dimension that have quite few NBT tags. And since these certain chunks have fewer NBT tags, they will take quite a bit less time to load, so it will take less time in the main game thread. Yeah, some other theories involved creating some extra delay in the beacon beam thread, and there's like a couple of theoretical ways to do that, but I'm probably not going to be going into those right now. And then yeah, the thing is, even if everything with the chunk loading works, which yeah, the chunk loading part is the part I have been able to perform. Like even if we get everything to work there, it needs to happen. We need to perform another race condition, and this one, it turns out, is quite a bit more difficult. This is the condition that needs to be performed to do the block swapping at the correct time for getting the falling block entity. And yeah, it turns out this block replacing needs to happen in a very, very tight window of time, and it's really quite difficult to perform this in practice. With my current setup, I have not been able to perform this yet legitimately, with a couple of like hacks and like if you know a little bit about like how threading code works, you could do a thread sleep with like performing or doing a thread sleep in specific locations in the code. I have been able to perform this even with just like a very short thread sleep. Like the lowest I got was I think like 5,000 nanoseconds or 5 microseconds. That's micro is 10 times 10 to the negative 6. So this is like a very tight window. Even with that short period of time, I have been able to perform it, but I haven't been able to do it for real, totally legitimately yet. But yeah, I'm going to be continuing to attempt to do this. And yeah, before I go back to Minecraft, one other thing I wanted to briefly talk about is that I don't think this exploit with asynchronously loading chunks, I don't think that this falling block swap exploit is the only application. I think there could be some other interesting things that could be done with it as well. Some ideas are maybe like tile entity or block or just like regular entity corruption, because basically we can perform like we can theoretically arbitrarily modify the world at like any point in time. So like any simple piece of code in the main game thread that is relying on not having to deal with race conditions, we should be able to like maybe use this for. Another idea was like maybe being able to perform NBT corruption, which if we were able to do that, I think that would probably just totally break the game completely. Another more straightforward idea maybe is being able to get the player head item, which I was actually spending some time trying to look in to see if it was possible. And I think it might be possible still. But yeah, that's one thing that I was pretty interested in, and I think could be possible to do. But yeah, I'm going to hop back to Minecraft now. Next, I'm going to show off my current setup for trying to perform this exploit and kind of try and do a little bit of in-depth explanation of where I'm at right now and like what I'm doing. So I'll be right there in a sec. All right, we're here in the game. So yeah, here I'm just going to try and kind of do my best to explain everything that's going on here. But yeah, so first off, I guess I should mention that the chunk I am in right now, this is chunk with chunk coordinates 674, 654 in the end. This is the chunk that I will be performing the chunk reloads on. So this is the chunk that will get loaded from the beacon beam thread when things get performed correctly. And yeah, so I guess first off, or I guess second off, maybe I could explain what exactly is going on down here with all these chunks outlined that you could see. So I am performing this chunk reloading using a rehash that happens when the map size goes from 257 to 513. So we are like sitting here in the center chunk here, and the rehash, we will be loading a chunk that's actually over here. As you can see up here, I have a little kind of arm going up here. This, we will have 192 chunks loaded, so that's like all these chunks, maybe a couple other ones too that are poking out. All these 192 chunks are going to be loaded, and when we are trying to perform the exploit, this chunk will get loaded and be the 193rd chunk to be loaded. and that is done with this piston, as you can see here. So I don't know if you saw down there as well, I have like hoppers pointing outwards from like the center area here to load all these chunks. So I'm like sitting in one of these center chunks here. It doesn't have to be the exact chunk that we're doing the reload in, but like one of the chunks. And then I have like a low view distance so that those chunks like out there that I'm like pointing at right now that you could see, those won't like are loaded or probably are loaded since you can see them now, but my view distance will be very low. And then those won't be loaded, and only like these outline chunks will be. And then we will be loading that chunk for the 193rd chunk. And when on the 193rd, the rehash from size 257 to 513 will happen. And that is when we want the get block state calls that are happening from this stained glass being removed. We want those get block state calls to happen when that chunk is causing the rehash. So if we look right here I just have like a clock, but then we have some pistons, and you could see here this piston right here will get retracted, and that will schedule a block event right here for this stained glass to be retracted. And then in the same game tick, using this instant piston chain here, this piston will also get retracted, and then that will block this redstone line, which will schedule a block event for retraction after that one got scheduled. So in the list of scheduled block events, we'll have that one for the tick, and then this one will be after that. So if we go back here, so yeah, as I said, this one is scheduled first, then that one. So first off, this piston will retract. This will cause the runnable to get submitted to the beacon thread, the beacon beam thread, and how the beacon beam thread works is like it'll iterate down from the top, all the way down from like the top of the world at y256, 255, all the way down to y equals 0. And it does like checks at each one of those. Having beacons here, like it does some additional checks for like the beacons as well. But yeah, this is not happening on the main game thread. This got submitted. This will be executing on that beacon beam thread. But then right after that got submitted in the main game thread, that block event starts to get run. That piston will retract. With this piston retracting, basically nearly right after the code starts getting executed for the block event, we get a block update from this piston head getting deleted, which updates this chunk right here, which is an empty void chunk, as you can maybe see. So this chunk will ideally get loaded pretty fast, maybe in around 100,000 nanoseconds or so. And yeah, hopefully before this beacon beam thread finishes executing, which with this setup pretty much happens all the time. Like this beacon beam thread will finish executing after that chunk gets loaded and starts to cause the rehash. So yeah, if everything goes right, the beacon beam thread will be doing a get block state on one of these blocks at this XZ coordinate, some random Y level. It'll do a get block state, and it won't be able to find this chunk here. You know, even though even if we were literally standing in it, the game will not be able to find this chunk, and it'll be like, okay, we have to load the chunk from disk because we don't have it. It's not here. So yeah, the game will start to try load the chunk from disk, and one of the main things here, you could see I have like sand here, but I also have a setup for chunk save stating here, which yeah, you should probably go check out Earth Computer's video on it. It'll be in the description. Having this here, or using this here, we could have made it so that the chunk on disk instead of having sand blocks here, we'll instead have end portal frames. So we right after that block event finished executing, we actually had an additional block event right here that got scheduled from this block event getting performed. A extension one gets scheduled here that executes after that one finishes retracting, and that causes this redstone block to get pushed, which will cause these pistons to retract. And this ideally will still be happening while we have sand blocks here, and this gets retracted. And then we also have instant tile ticks enabled, so this gets retracted. The piston gets the sand gets a block update. It sees I need to start falling, so, and with instant tile ticks it'll immediately start falling, or at least it will start doing the code to start executing the falling. Like, it'll check, make sure we still have a sand block in this position, and then eventually it will start creating the falling block, or will create the falling block entity. But ideally we would have the beacon beam thread put this chunk, which was reloaded now with end portal frames, we would have it get put in the map after it had done the check for this sand block, to after the check to see if it was sand was done, but before the falling block entity gets created. So let's say we did that. We now have an end portal frame here, and like right before a falling block entity starts to get created. And if everything went right, it will create a falling block entity of an end portal frame. And yeah, that would go down in there. And yeah, in the past, I made a mod to sleep in the code where, like before the falling block entity was created. And when I did that, I was able to successfully get a falling, or an item from this falling block entity of an end portal frame. And yeah, I only had a quite short period sleep of, the lowest was at like 5,000 nanoseconds, I think I said. And that was able to perform it successfully. The map put of the chunk happened presumably in that sleeping period, and then we were able to get a falling block of an end portal frame. In reality, we wouldn't have that sleep. We would need it to be performed, the put to be performed in a very tight sequence of code that's getting executed. And I've been running this AFK. This is an AFKable setup to try and get this to happen, but I still have not been able to get it to happen in practice. So that is basically the current state right now. There is like the additional timing consideration of trying to get the map put of this chunk to happen while some of these sand are trying to start falling, which I am able to do, seemingly correct, like a bunch of the code. I can get the map put to happen while one of these sands code is doing the code to start falling, but that really isn't enough. It has to be within like a very specific place. So yeah, like these in the main thread, these sand will all try to start falling like right after each other. Like the code for this one maybe gets run first, and then this one, which might not be in that order actually, due to like the redstone dust or something. But yeah, these will try and like fall after each other in the main game thread, and I can get the map put to happen while like this is happening, but seemingly I haven't gotten to happen in the right place in the sand falling code like before the the falling entity gets created. So I do think it should be theoretically possible with this current setup. I'm probably going to keep trying with it. I'll also provide world download. Maybe if some of you guys are willing to help out, maybe you can run this as well, or try and make some modifications to it to see, or that may help try and do this. But yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at, I would say. I have like some command blocks over here that, here you have to turn this clock on, and then you also need to make sure your game is in such a state that only these 192 chunks are normally loaded, which involves having a lower view distance, as well as, I believe, disabling mob spawning, because mob spawning can load chunks outside that range. So like the game rule do mob spawning or something, I think you have to turn off, or just turn your game to peaceful maybe. But yeah, it may be kind of annoying if you don't like have some hacks to see if everything's working properly like I do. But yeah, yeah, like these command blocks here, I have just like this, which will create new falling sand entity like on every attempt, and we'll also replace these pistons, because sometimes when the actual reload success happens, sometimes these pistons will like glitch out and disappear, like if it's on like the correct sand block. So I also have a command to like replace the pistons. Also, if you like get the reload to happen successfully, like the chunk will be kind of glitched out visually. Like I could actually show that if I run a command here. So I just force the chunk to reload from file, like the one from disk, into the game. Maybe this wasn't working properly actually. Oh, maybe I had the save state on. This doesn't happen properly. Maybe I can still get this to happen successfully. If I run this here, let's see. Might have screwed this up here, but whatever. I'm not going to attempt to do it, but like visual stuff will start to like happen where there might be like no blocks here, or like end portal frames, even though there's actually a sand. You'll have to like right click on it to actually see it. But yeah, this, like it'll still have the right blocks. Like those command blocks should still replace them fine, and everything should still be in the right place. You also will need like a hack to enable instant tile ticks. I think the carpet mod has a hack for that. I have my own hack for that actually. Just this instant ticks command, which will enable it. Looks like the visual thing might be screwed up actually even right now. But yeah. So we will need instant tile ticks enabled as well, but not fall instantly flag, not the instant block falling, like the one that does the lazy chunk block falling. Okay, so you can see here, this chunk is like visually glitched out still. It's like a client server thing or something, where it won't have the right block, but it actually should. But yeah, you need to save state the end portal frames onto disk, and then continually perform this, and then if the reload happens, it will replace it with the sand. Or that's not right. It'll replace the sand with the end portal frames, ideally at the right time. And yeah, this setup basically will attempt it every 1 minute or so. Every 45 seconds, the autosave happens, and in this case, I'm able to use that for the downsizing rehash. So after the rehash up to size 513, we need under a 96 size, which is 3/16 times the hash size, in order to rehash it down to a size of 256. And yeah, since we had 93 chunks loaded, after the autosave we will have 93, since 100 chunks get saved. and then that's below the 96 threshold, so it'll automatically resize down, which is something that other hash sizes probably won't be able to do. But yeah, I was able to do it with this setup. And then I also have this clock, I don't have it exactly 45 seconds because I need it to be more than a minute, because I believe having it be more than 1 minute forces the thread pool that creates the threads to execute the beacon thread code. If it has been more than 1 minute since a thread was used, it basically just discards the thread, and then it creates a new one, which has some overhead and actually delays the beacon thread a bit, from what I could tell. So it forces it to create a new thread if it's greater than 1 minute from my testing, and then that also helps us get a little bit of extra delay in this beacon thread, which we need so that that chunk load doesn't happen before this finishes. So that's the reason that is done that way. I also attempted trying to delay the reload of this chunk, like how long it takes the load to happen, using a few different methods. It seemed like adding a bunch of random tile entities in the chunk helps delay it quite a bit. But yeah, so maybe you can, I believe, adjust how long this takes to get put into the map, so that might help a little bit with the delay with respect to the game thread and having these sand start falling. So I guess that's another thing to note, but I think that's it. I don't think I have anything else I need to explain. There's always something I forget to explain in my videos, but yeah, I can't think of anything else right now. I guess obviously there's quite a bit of stuff going on here. If you have some serious questions about kind of how things are trying to happen, how I'm trying to do things in practice, or even some of the theory, feel free to leave a comment, or maybe if I left out something, which I probably did, feel free to comment that. I guess one more thing I wanted to also mention again, XCOM's live streams that he's been doing on his Twitch channel. At least the one he did a week ago or so. I thought the guys there did a really good job explaining kind of how this stuff works. So I tried to do my best here as well, but there's probably some stuff I left out or I didn't explain as clear as should be. They also made quite a few diagrams and stuff for what's going on. So I would definitely recommend watching the VOD of that stream, or staying tuned in for some of XCOM's future streams, because yeah, he's also working on this. He was working on a setup, a more realistic setup for the overworld, because obviously you can't just get end portal frames in the end dimension I'm trying to I have here. So the guys did also some seed finding. I think it was Matthew. He did some seed finding to be able to find a chunk where the end portal frame was in a proper chunk that has the proper hash that can be a chunk that can be reloaded. So here I have the 674654 chunk. This is a specific chunk. This can't just be any random chunk. This chunk has specific bits that are gotten when performing the key hash. So these coordinates are specific and are the hash is done properly so that it can work from a chunk rehash from 257 to 513. But you can't just use any chunk for this. You also can't use this for other size rehashes because 2 bits needed to be the same. There has to be one more 0, and then the next bit has to be a 1. But what Matthew did was find a chunk for some specific rehash sizes that is a proper chunk that can have the reload performed on that size. That could be usable in the overworld. In the overworld, there's like more considerations because you have like the spawn chunks as well, and also maybe on like a server, you have to consider other players loading chunks and miscellaneous stuff. But yeah, like XCOM, I guess what I'm trying to say, XCOM was working on trying to do like a realistic setup for the overworld. There's still like some stuff that needs to be worked out for the overworld. I think we might have to like try and get some of our theories to work in practice to just get stuff working still. So there's still some outstanding stuff there. But I guess what I'm trying to say is go check out his streams. He's done some cool stuff there, as well as check out all the other stuff in the description. There's hopefully gonna have quite a long list of stuff there. But yeah, I think that's it. That's all I have for this one. Hopefully can cover some more stuff in a future video as well, but I think I covered most of what you may need to know for this right now. So yeah, I guess thanks for watching. I will see you guys later. Bye.